All right, we'll get started here. First and foremost, good afternoon, good morning, everybody. Like I mentioned, my name is Jay Sensi of Campus Kaizen. Welcome to our Lean Introduction webinar. I want to thank everybody for joining us. Just to get started, to give you a little bit of idea of who you're talking to, if you haven't heard of Campus Kaizen before, we are a software solutions provider and continuous improvement consulting agency that works primarily in the higher ed and K-12 markets. We do serve some other industries as well, but the core business of ours is in higher education and K-12. Some of you may be familiar with some of our software products. We have two main software products. Our My College Roomie software is our roommate matching software. We also have Guardian, which is a case management software often used for things like conduct and Title IX and care, among other things, for both higher education and for K through 12. Other things that we do is we are also process improvement consultants and trainers. So we provide some consulting services as well as Lean Six Sigma training, which is kind of why we're here today. Just so you know who's talking, again, my name is Jay Sensi. I'm founder and president of Campus Kaizen. In a prior life, I spent a lot of time in continuous improvement before launching this company. I am a Lean Six Sigma Master Black Belt, which is the highest level of certification you can achieve in the world of Six Sigma. Across the last decade or so, I've taught process improvement methodologies and have overseen and facilitated Kaizen events in 10 countries on 4 continents. And I've also led various continuous improvement efforts for some major corporations that you may recognize. I'm excited to give everyone here a bit of an introduction to Lean. Lean is something that I think is really important. It's also something that I think can be very easily understood. It doesn't take a rocket scientist to apply Lean, and so I'm really excited to be able to show folks the tools and the benefit to various industries. We've got a few key objectives here with our webinar. We want to help really define Lean in kind of common terms, understand why Lean is important, why we should care about it. We'll spend some time talking about our traditional office environment and why there may be some inefficiencies there, as well as introduce waste and the various types of it, and also hopefully define value and help you understand why we focus on driving and providing value and also eliminating waste. So what is Lean? Lean essentially came from the Toyota production system, Toyota being the car manufacturer. It was developed and run by a gentleman by the name of Taiichi Ono a few decades ago, who really perfected the Lean methodology. And it's a set of tools with the goal of eliminating waste and what we call non-value added, or NVA, as you see the acronym there, with the goal of eliminating waste and non-value added activity in a process. In terms of why we should care about it, as our friend Bob here says, times they are changing, and especially now in the current environment with the COVID situation going on, we see a lot of organizations, a lot of teams, a lot of departments kind of forced to keep production up and keep their accountabilities up, and oftentimes with folks that are furloughed or let go and so forth. And so organizations and teams are now more than ever being asked to do more with less. And so the amount of work doesn't often change, but sometimes the amount of bodies does. And so Lean is something that should be always considered throughout the time of an organization, not only in times of kind of crisis like this. But the reasons that we put so much focus on Lean is because we really want to increase a number of things. We want to increase the quality of our product, whether that be a product or a service. We want to increase our own productivity. We want to be sustainable. We want our employees to be satisfied and to have some skin in the game with improving their own processes. And of course, those organizations that operate to drive profits, care about increasing those profits as well. And so, with that in mind, what I'd like to do is start to talk a little bit about, how the traditional office is organized, and how you can start seeing some of the drawbacks on where it becomes difficult to provide value, when you break down some of the current practices that people use. And as I'm talking about some of these things, I'd like each of you to kind of think about whether they exist in your own environment, your own department, your own office. I'd imagine a number of them may hit home. And so, the first one here is the idea of kind of the account rep or the process owner, with personal ownership. My account, my process, and why do people do that? Well, it's kind of the old adage, it's the way it's always been done. And so I'm sure a number of you have heard that in the past. This is the way we always have done it. And that's kind of the old school mindset of why change? It's worked so far. There's kind of a sense of continuity and tradition, but it also gives people a sense of responsibility. That I own it, and then there's this perception that I provide value to my customer and so forth. But a drawback there, is that it's really hard to get coverage for it. And, the employee really has to deal with highly fluctuating demand. So, you might have a stack of work and more work that comes in on the same day, and you end up with piles and piles of work forming up. Also quite inherent in the traditional office, because you have a single person doing a single function, in a lot of cases, you lack the documentation and continuity that can take you over a long period of time, because most of the information is kept as, tribal knowledge, as we say. People just know it and they pass it down to their replacements, and there's not really any good reference material that you or really anybody else can pick up and take a look at and understand the process. And the problem with this is that in a small company or department, that's not lean, there's often no time or no opportunity to devote resources to documenting processes, because you spend all your time actually doing the work. I hear it all the time. We don't have time to document. We don't have time for this. Our plates are full with what we have to do. But there's also an emotional piece to it, and the emotional piece is that people like to feel secure in their jobs. And the one way they feel secure is by being the only one with a particular piece of knowledge. And, that's not really an overt way of doing it, but, people do want to feel protected in their work, and, they're not likely going to go out there and offer information, and they're probably not going to resist it either, but they're probably not going to go out there and be, very open about it, and you're certainly not going to be advertising that they're the only ones that know secrets and tricks of the trade and quick ways of doing things, unless it's really a culture that kind of draws that out of them. And so the problem with this is that the process becomes unrepeatable. If you have different people doing different things and they're doing them differently and you don't have it documented, you don't really have anything to build on. It becomes really hard to get backup, or to train replacements. So if you're out of the office for the day and you're the only one who knows how to do this, you can see how the process is going to be sitting and waiting for you till you get back. Additionally, if this person were to leave, be terminated, win the lottery, hit by a bus, however you want to say it, there's a good chance they're going to be taking that tribal knowledge with them. And so everybody else in the office is really going to be left trying to figure out how to put the puzzle back together. And so one of the reasons that we really value documentation is to really help with ensuring proper business continuity. Another issue that we have in the traditional office is that there's often no specific linking between processes. So we do what we call over-the-wall processing. I do my job and I toss it over the wall to the next step, and there's no sense of whether or not they're ready for it, or if they've even asked for more work, or if they need it. So it's kind of a very disconnected series of processes. And of course, when you're disconnected like that, you're very much limited and have limited cooperation. And the reason for this is that you tend to work in piles, and so you have a lot of long lead time items, and the flow is very lengthy. So we spend most of our time in the work, and nothing's really flowing through the system. It's just kind of sitting in a pile for a long time, and that disconnect just contributes to this lack of the process linking. A couple more. One is that the staffing is often independent of demand in a traditional office. And this is kind of like the old concept that says, even a broken clock is right twice a day. If you've got a steady or very constant staffing, for example, you've got 6 people doing a job or 4 people doing a job, and that never fluctuates, but your work does and your workload does, then technically you're never really properly staffed. You're either overstaffed when demand is low, or you are understaffed when the demand is high. So even if over a long period of time you're meeting your goal, there's still going to be those hills and valleys. And kind of what happens there is that people tend to work faster and slower, and it causes problems throughout the chain of processes. And now, oftentimes the reason for this is that it's often hard to get help in a process. If you've got a 4-person team, it's not that easy to bring in a 5th person and have them assist with the process. And what you get with this is kind of like an accordion effect. When the pile gets bigger, people work faster. And people work slower when the pile gets smaller. And nobody's really ever working at a steady pace. The other problem, is when you work at different paces and do different processes, you often open the door to make more mistakes, and then those mistakes contribute to additional problems over the course of the time working. And then finally, there's often a single person doing a single process, so you have one person very specifically dedicated to a specific action. If one person manages housing applications, one person does assignments, one person does billing, you have a single person assigned to a single process, and this happens, very often in functional organizations. And the downside is that you really restrict the way that work can flow through the organization, and you have multiple contact points with a particular customer. So if you think about something like a housing assignment process, the student applies, and the student might work with a housing team member. Then if they want to request a specific assignment, they work with an assignment coordinator. And then to pay their bill, they're contacted by a billing specialist. And then if they fall behind, somebody from collections is reaching out. And so a single customer might have contact with many different people. Each time it causes, kind of a ramp up period for that particular customer and for the organization. So, all these things that we look at and all the drawbacks, the drawbacks really have one thing in common, and that they all have waste and that they add waste to your process. And when we talk about waste, really kind of what we're talking about here is that waste is being kind of anything that consumes resources without adding value. Now, you may have your own interpretation of value, but we're going to tell you what value is defined as in Lean a little bit later. And so when I went through some of those office environments, as well as some of the drawbacks, hopefully you've seen some things that kind of ring a bell and hit home in terms of being prevalent in your environment. The 8 forms of waste as defined by Lean are showed here, and they're defects, they're overprocessing, transportation, motion, waiting, inventory, overproduction, and unused skills. And this is kind of a traditional look at waste, and it comes from the early days of the Toyota production system. We won't go into the details of all 8 forms of waste today, but like I mentioned earlier, we'll be offering some additional learning opportunities that will go into detail that I'll talk about a little bit later. Now, all these 8 wastes are bad, but the biggest one on this list, and the biggest problem overall, is overproduction. And the reason that overproduction is the biggest problem of all is that it often hides the other forms of the waste. So if you're working ahead, let's say you got a pile of work and you're working ahead. If by chance you're making mistakes in what you're doing, you may send those mistakes down the line, or it may be too late until you're able to catch them. So, let's think about it this way. Let's say, you're doing a bunch of processes, you're doing billing, and let's say the tuition rate changes. And you've already started invoicing a bunch of invoices, and you didn't realize that the tuition rate has changed, and you've been sending out all these invoices because you work in a batch with the wrong tuition rate. And so it may be a long time before you figure out that it was wrong, and you will have to go back and fix all of those invoices. Whereas if you were doing kind of a flow process that Lean will teach you, you might have gotten a call back from one of the first customers or students that you sent the invoice to, letting you know that the tuition rate was wrong, and you could have fixed your problem before you sent out a ton of invoices down the line with the wrong information. And so, overproduction, when you work without having a very specific piece of demand, without any flow, you can create all these other types of waste. And the reason we talk about this, and the real issue here, is that waste often disguises itself as work or value-added work. And to kind of illustrate this, for a minute, I'm going to kind of give an example of what we witnessed when we did one of our consulting engagements on campus. We're working with an institution trying to streamline their assignments process, and they were working on an assignments process for various types of buildings and learning communities. And so, they would track which communities or buildings students are authorized to live in, and then kind of assist with the assignment process. And so, I'll kind of generalize here, and I'll talk about Department A and Department B. Essentially, what we noticed is that Department A would fill out a form, and they would make a copy of it, file one copy away, and then send the additional copy over to Department B. Department B would file the copy. Department B would fill out their own form, and then send their form back to Department A to match it up with the original, and then file the 2 forms away. And so, as I watched this process to look at opportunities to improve it, I realized that after the forms were filed, nobody really touched them. And so when we asked both departments why they were using the form, both departments said that they were filling them out for the other department. Building A thought they were doing something that Department B needed, and Department B thought that they were doing something that Department A needed. So they both thought that they were doing it for the other group, and so it became very obvious that this is something that they could get rid of right away if nobody's really using the information. And so, what had happened over the course of a few months thereafter is they ended up moving to, an online software database. And so kind of this form went away and went online, and nobody needed the forms anymore. But really what we found is that, nobody ever talked about it. And what happened, even though they thought they were filling out the form for the other party, they thought that they were adding value to the process by doing this step. And it looked like real work, but at the end of the day, it was completely useless. Nobody was using it, so it was waste. And so I bet if you looked hard enough, you can find a lot of that when you really start to scrutinize a process. Things are going to start jumping out at you like that are kind of low-hanging fruit that you can chop off right away and be better for it. Oftentimes when we teach lean, we like to use kind of the iceberg analogy when we talk about waste, especially in the office environment. And a lot of times when we show this, especially when we do this in person, you can see that what I'm about to say kind of makes some folks uncomfortable, and it should. It's not meant to be intentional, but and some folks are not going to really like to hear this, but really it's reality, and quite frankly should be shocking and eye-opening to you when I say this. And what I'm about to say is, when we look at waste, about 90% of the work that we do in the office, per the definition by lean, would be categorized as waste. 90%. That's quite a bit. Now, this doesn't mean that we're saying that everything you do during the day is worthless. That's not what we're getting to. The point we're trying to make is that when you define, which we'll define later, what value is, by the definition of value, about 90% of the time that we spend doing what we do at work is technically not adding any value to the process or the product. Which, if we're looking at this on the bright side, and with a rose-colored sunglasses here, this means that we've got a lot of opportunity to improve. There's probably a lot of low-hanging fruit that we can adjust, improve, and have better processes for it. And so some types of waste here are people waste. I would bet that everybody on this call today has been in an ineffective meeting or a meeting that could have been an email. We often underutilize our people's talents or don't train them enough. People often aren't sure what their roles are, or they've got to do retrainings, and people leave and we've got to replace them, and there's turnover, and this is all waste in the office environment. We also have process waste, unnecessary approvals or bottlenecks while we're waiting for things. Communication barriers, defects are a big thing. There's mistakes that cause rework, and where we have to go back in and do something over is waste. Work that's not totally done, incompatible systems, especially software that doesn't talk to each other. Searching and looking for stuff, trying to find files in a Dropbox or a share folder. Information that we collect that nobody does anything with. All different types of process waste. And then, of course, we've got information waste. We've got to convert formats of information. The data is not right. It's missing. It's incorrect. It's not needed. These are all different types of information waste. And so, I'm showing a lot here on the screen, and I really want you to think about these things and wonder and determine if some of these things apply in your environment. And this is not meant to be a knock. This is just, we're opening our eyes a little bit, and we're being able to see waste. And once you learn to see it, it doesn't go away. You will see it everywhere. And some of the points we're trying to make here is, imagine if these things didn't exist. Imagine if you can get rid of some of these things. Imagine having the time back in your day to focus on other projects, or for those of you that are often working late, being able to leave work on time because you've been able to institute some simple changes to make your processes flow better. This is a beautiful thing, and we each have a really great opportunity here to help our organizations do more with less effort. If we just focus on waste. That's what lean teaches us. And so when we talk about the traditional office, we got into the traditional office and the drawbacks there. What we're talking about here is, how do we define a lean office? Basically, a lean office is an office that applies the different lean principles to their administrative setting. And there's a lot to do here. This is something that you want to do. You want to take the basic tools of lean, like flow, like 6S, like documentation and demand management, and institute these things in the culture of your workplace. These are all things you should be doing in the office, and these are all ways to reduce waste in your organization. And so, when I talk about lean, what I'm talking about is reducing waste to provide you the opportunity to better serve your company, your institution, your customers. Now, I hope at this point you're all convinced that we should wage a war on waste. However, if there's some folks that are still a little skeptical and you're not yet convinced yet, I'm going to talk a little bit about why we should focus on waste so much. As humans, and I'm sure we're all guilty of it at some point, our typical thought process is when we need to do something faster or get more done, we tend to just speed up. Our thought is, I've got to do something faster? No problem. I'll just work faster. That's not the goal of lean here. My goal is to get you to become lean thinkers. Instead of simply working faster, and by the way, working faster also opens the door for making more mistakes. I want us all to develop a mindset of, instead of making effort to work faster, make effort to eliminate waste in our process, which will in turn make the process faster. Let's look at a kind of a simple chart example. So in this example here, let's use our imagination and we'll say that we've analyzed our process. You can make it whatever process you want. We've done an analysis and we've applied some of the lean tools to analyze a process, and we've decided that our process has about 6 hours worth of waste, 1 hour worth of value added time. Okay, so again, we'll talk about value add in a moment, but we've done this 6 hours of waste, 1 hour of value added time. What that means is that we have a process that takes 7 hours. In lean, we have a very simple formula that we use that's called process efficiency. And to calculate the efficiency of a process, we simply take the value added time and divide it by the total time. So we're just looking here at a percentage. We want to know how efficient is our process. So in this situation, we would take 1 hour, which is our value added time, divide it by the total, 7 hours, and we would see that we have a process efficiency of only 14%. What this means is that our process here is only 14% efficient based on our measurements. Now, why would we focus on waste? In our traditional improvement focus, if you remember the little image that I had with Jim Carrey typing super fast, our first instinct when we need to do something faster is to just work faster. So we try to speed up our value added time. And if we were to do that, you'll see that we really haven't touched the waste at all, but we have made our value added time faster. So that hour is now half an hour. If we did this, you'll see that we haven't touched the waste. Our waste is still 6 hours, but our value added time, what we're actually adding to the product or the process, is now cut in half to half an hour. Which means our new process is 6.5 hours long. And if we do our process cycle calculation, you'll see that we have made our process less efficient than it originally was. We have now gotten a process that is only 8% efficient because we chopped out the value added time and we didn't even touch the waste. So not only did we make our process less efficient, but we've also opened the door for more opportunities because we're now really working faster than we need to provide value. What lean teaches us is to focus on the value stream. So focusing on the value stream means reducing the waste. So look what happens if we were to reduce the waste by 50% instead of reducing the value added activity by 50%. Now we're making progress here. Before I even show you the calculation, you can see that that process is significantly smaller. If we did this, our waste is now 3 hours. Our value added is still 1 hour, because remember, we didn't touch that. New process is 4 hours. And our new process cycle efficiency is now up to 25%. So a pretty good improvement from where we were by simply focusing on the waste. And now we don't have to put ourselves under stress to work any faster than we were prior. We're still spending the same amount of time on our value-added activity. We've just cut out some of the waste, and we're now a heck of a lot more efficient because of it. A few misconceptions about lean. Some folks are of the impression that you can only apply this to manufacturing. You're producing cars, you're producing widgets, you're producing a physical product. That is not true. A process is a process. You can apply it anywhere. Folks think that you can't apply lean for project work or for cyclical work. A process is still a process, whether it's cyclical or consistent. And hopefully by now I've convinced you that lean can be practical in the front office. Another thing we like to touch on lean is oftentimes we work with organizations that are driven by profit. A lot of businesses are driven by profit. And so as we all know, profit is calculated by taking your sale price and subtracting what it costs you to make the product. And so that's very simple. So if we look at this little bar here, the top of this bar is our sale price, and the green is our profit, and the red is our cost. So you see we've got a pretty small profit in relation to how much we're spending to make it. And so companies oftentimes that think that they affect the selling price, that a company determines what they sell something for. When in reality, it's really the market. It's really the customer that determines what they sell something for. Our company, we sell software. I would love to be able to sell our roommate matching software for $100,000 per school. The fact of the matter is I wouldn't get any sales because the customers just won't pay that much for it. So really, my selling price for my software is dictated by how much customers are willing to pay for it. So in reality, it is the customer and the market that dictates what I can sell my product for. And so as a company, if I want to maximize profits and I can't control the selling price, the only way for me to continue growing profits is to control what I can control, which is my cost. And so if I'm someone that is applying lean tools, lean principles, I may be able to apply them to where I can chop down my costs, and even if the selling price stays the same, I'm now earning more profit because I've applied lean tools to shave off some costs. Also, lean is also a defensive mechanism against market downturns, especially now with the COVID situation. Oftentimes, prices are reduced, clients can't pay as much for products, and so what happens is oftentimes we have market pressures, and market pressures will drive down the selling price of a product, which means I can no longer sell it for what I used to. And so imagine if I had not applied lean tools and reduced my cost, and my cost is still how it was in the first column here. If my sale price is now here, I now have zero profit because the market has reduced my selling price. My costs are still high. I'm not making any money. Not going to survive all that long with a situation like that. But as a smart organization, we've applied lean tools. We've reduced our cost. We were for a point in time really maximizing profits. But even in a situation where there's a market downturn and we've have to reduce our sale price, we're still able to generate a profit because we've done the work ahead of time. So lean can also be a proactive measure against market fluctuations over time. What we focus on lean and kind of the end goal of lean is really, in a perfect scenario, we want to have only value-added tasks take place within the process. We want to be able to scrape all waste out of the process. Now, that's not always all feasible to do all the waste, but that should be our goal. And so I talked about value quite a bit during our time together today. And so really what I want to do and hone in on here is kind of define value for you. And so when we talk about value, for a task to be value added to a process, it has to meet all of these three criteria. The customer has to care about it or pay for it. and that could be your internal or your external customer. The thing must change, so you have to be able to change the product or the process or the information. If you're not changing anything, you're not adding any value. You're just moving it around. And it's got to be done right the first time. If it's not done right the first time, then you're going to have to redo it, and it's totally waste. And so I always stress on this, that for a task to be value added, it has to meet all of these criteria. Not one, not two, it's got to meet them all. Customer has to care about it. It's got to be done right the first time, and the thing must change. And again, here shows up our metric here, our calculation for process cycle efficiency that we saw an example of a little bit earlier. Our basic goals of Lean are first and foremost to satisfy the customer's demands. So that could be any customer, an internal customer, the next department that takes our information or that takes our product. Could be an external customer, a student, a parent, an end user, a consumer. So paramount is making the customer happy. Second is also doing as little as possible to make the customer happy. We want to be able to do as little as possible in order to achieve our goal, so that we can reduce our costs, our time, and so forth. More in, faster out, less cost on the way through. Lean's also a mindset. It's a long-term philosophy. It's something that should be ingrained in a culture, and that doesn't happen overnight. You do this by executing and showing leadership that you can have quick wins by using this methodology. So it very much should be a strategic effort, and of course, like we say, a relentless attack on waste. It's also something that's never really done. You're never really done with Lean. You should have iterations of Lean that continually improve over time, which is why we call it, continuous improvement. And so you may have wondered what Kaizen means. You may have heard Kaizen. You may have been exposed to Kaizen in other organizations that you've worked. And so, Kaizen, the term is a Japanese term that's used in the continuous improvement world, and it's synonymous with continuous improvement. And its literal translation is good change or change for the better. And so that's what we're about here, and that's what Lean is about, is continually changing for the better, incrementally over time. And so a Kaizen event is a short burst improvement activity, often between 1 and 5 days, depending on the size of the process, really focused on being an intense improvement activity to streamline or improve, one particular, business or process. It's narrow focused. You're not boiling the ocean, and most importantly, it's one cycle of improvement. So when we say continuous improvement, what we don't mean is get it perfect the first time. You're never going to get perfect. But what Lean is meant to do, and what Six Sigma is meant to do, is have iterations. So if I improve this process by 50% today, it's going to be that much better. But imagine if I went and did a process improvement again on it in a few months, and I improved it by 50% again, and then improved it again, and improved it again. You're incrementally getting closer and closer to perfection. You may never get there, but each iteration and each process improvement that you do, you're getting closer and closer and better each time that you do it. And so, this is not meant to be a one and done. This is meant to be a mindset and a culture, and something that is done continuously. If you're more interested in learning how we do a Kaizen event, I'm going to be giving you some opportunities for future learning that you're welcome to join us to get a little bit deeper. When we teach Lean, we typically talk about two different types of roles in a Lean environment. There's the Lean practitioner, which is somebody who can demonstrate understanding of the Lean tools in such a way that they can help institute change. They become change agents. These are the folks that are kind of the boots on the ground, that are helping to identify improvement opportunities and actually taking the efforts to go ahead, analyze processes, come up with creative ideas, and make things more efficient for their departments. Really trying to help achieve what we call the future state value stream. But maybe equally as important is the lean champion, because the lean champion's role is to open doors and remove roadblocks that the practitioner might have and free them up to make those changes. A champion is often a department lead or a team leader, somebody in a leadership position that has authority to allow you to make changes, that opens doors for you, that supports you, that understands the value of lean and allows you to be successful by using the tools. And so oftentimes when we do lean training, we're doing practitioners and champions. So we've got leaders in with employees in their organization, so that everybody gets the value, gets the same message, understands why lean is important, and so the champions can support the practitioners over time. And so when we finish off our introductions, I always like to show this graphic because I think it really tells a very common story. You know, when I talk to folks about continuous improvement, or opportunities for us to assist with continuous improvement, often the response is, we don't have time for that. You know, we're too busy. I don't have time to do this because I've got to get my work done. My day is filled with getting work done. I don't have time to improve. I don't have time to document. But you know, this graphic here, I think, tells a very interesting story in terms of, imagine if you took a little bit of time, or these cavemen here took a little bit of time to listen to what the person on the left had to offer. I bet they wouldn't have to work as hard, you know, dragging those boulders across the ground, if they took a little bit of time to improve their process. And so, yes, we're all busy. Yes, we all have a lot to do. But we should never be too busy for continuous improvement, because a little bit of work now will really pay dividends substantially down the line. And I think, you know, this quote by Mark Twain really kind of sums it up. You know, that continuous improvement is always better than delayed perfection. If you keep putting this off, thinking it's going to be perfect one day, you're going to be waiting a hell of a long time for it to get there. Rather, we suggest taking baby steps in terms of continuous improvement to get a little bit closer each time towards perfection. Now, I hope I've piqued your interest a little bit. I hope this has been valuable so far. I hope some folks are saying, you know, how do I learn more? What are the tools? How do I do this? This is definitely something I can apply in my world. And so, what would be the benefits of further learning? One, we would want to teach you the actual tools. We want to go through the tools, and lean is not something you learn in an hour. This is a very big methodology with lots of different tools, and requires application and requires practice. You know, you don't learn lean in a day. You learn lean by learning the tools over the course of perhaps a few days of training or a few hours of training, and actually applying the tools in your work. And so the benefits of learning lean, of course, is learning the tools, but building your own skill set and your own value. And these are tools that can be applied everywhere. You know, I don't think all of you are going to be in the same job for the rest of your careers, which means you'll move around. And so, you know, lean is something you can take with you. It's a tool that you've got in your toolbox for life. You can use it at home. You can use it in anywhere your career may take you. It's also quite a good resume booster as well, in terms of, you know, being able to show that you're a change agent and that you understand these things, and that you can take them and apply them wherever you may go. But, you know, in the short term, we want you to be a change agent for your campus, your district, your company, your organization, to help to institute change. And so, you know, I would encourage, you know, anybody that's interested to take steps to become a lean practitioner. You know, we offer courses to get there, and I'll talk about that in a minute. You don't certainly have to stick with us. There are other options for you. But I would encourage you, if you have an interest in this, and something has piqued your interest here, to explore it, because it is something that's valuable, you know, for you for really the remainder of your career. And so I did promise some further learning opportunities. And so, you know, one of the things that we want to talk about here is we're very excited to announce, you know, the Campus Kaizen Lean Academy, which is something that we've created, knowing that a lot of folks may be virtual for a time that can use these tools, and now more than ever, our partners and our friends in the industries that we support really need these tools to streamline processes, to become more efficient, to continue supporting their internal and external customers. And so, we're probably the only organization in higher ed and maybe K-12 at this point that I would consider to be experts in Lean and Six Sigma methodologies. And so, we would feel a disservice if we didn't offer this as an option for folks to try to take and transfer that knowledge and use it to benefit your organizations and institutions. And so our Lean Academy is launching. It is going to be a Lean Fundamentals course, and I'll talk about what that means, but it'll encompass 8 hours of training over the course of 6 weeks. It'll be done all virtually. You won't have to see anybody in person. Of course, I'll talk about some on-site opportunities later, at the end of which you'll be issued a Lean Practitioner certificate that you can take and frame if you'd like, or keep in your back pocket, or be proud of that you've learned and applied the Lean tools. The scope of that training is we're going to talk about Lean tools, waste elimination, the 8 forms of waste, how to identify it, how to find it, how to eliminate it, root cause analysis, finding root causes of your issues and how to fix them, put in corrective actions. We'll talk about creating a 6S workplace environment of organization and visual indicators, how to structure and complete a Kaizen event, and also focus on value stream mapping so you can identify in any of your processes what's value added and what's waste. We're going to be offering a few different cohorts, one in July, one in September and October. The first one starts July 15th. And so typically, Lean training is often not the cheapest to attain because it often does come with a certification, and certifications often aren't cheap. I will tell you, when we come to a campus or organization and train a large group of folks, the typical pricing for something like this is usually around $1,200 per person for this type of training, application, and certification. Now, we know that's out of reach for a lot of folks. We know times are a bit difficult. We know professional development funds are often quite small, if not non-existent, and we know folks oftentimes are now digging out of their own pockets to support development efforts for future learning. And so that's why for our next cohort, at least for the July cohort, we're going to be offering a seat in this training for 300. We feel that's extremely high value. I don't think you can find another Lean course anywhere for anything close to that that provides a certification. And so, with this, there's the Lean Fundamentals, 8 hours of training, 6 weeks, virtually. I'll put a link to this in the chat. I'll also send this out with the recording after our training as well. We hope to see some of you, join our Lean Academy. Some other things that we do for further learning is, hopefully we get to a point where we can start doing this on site again. We call this our on-campus training packages, where we do a learning to see, 2 days of in-person training on Lean and Six Sigma. We also do Lean Practitioner and Certification Prep, which is a 4-day training, also on site. This one includes a lot of classroom exercises to really drive home the topics, give you some hands-on experience with applying the tools. And then we also do Six Sigma Yellow Belt training, which is also a 2-day in-person training with classroom exercises, in which case you'll be essentially certified as a Six Sigma Yellow Belt. We also offer Kaizen consulting for anybody that may be interested. Right now we're doing some right-size staffing, where we're helping organizations analyze their current processes and identify how much staff they really need, whether they need to add people or have opportunities to reduce, to right-size staff based on their needs. We also do Kaizen consulting, where we actually come to a site or a campus and facilitate Kaizen events, help you focus on eliminating waste or streamlining processes. Most recently, before COVID hit, we spent a week at the University of Minnesota. And so what we did there is we spent a week, we did some 2-day Lean training with about 25 people. And then we spent 2 days doing some Kaizen events on some of their assignment processes. And so that's often really beneficial. Of course, that assumes that we'll all get back to campus at some point, but this is also an option to have us kind of oversee that consulting process and Kaizen process for you. We also do process mapping and documentation. So a lot of folks say they don't have the time or they're too busy to document processes. So we send people to your site or campus and sit and document. And the deliverable there is standard operating procedures. We capture all the tribal knowledge. We document it so that you've got resources to refer to train people for, and as kind of a safeguard for business practices and continuity. And then we also do some process improvement mentoring. So for folks that become lean practitioners that need some help with kind of guiding processes and overseeing Kaizens, we do some virtual mentoring that we offer as well. All of this information and more can be found on our website, campuskaizen.com. With that, I am going to take a few questions from the chat. And then we'll open up and unmute some folks, allow folks to ask some questions. I hope this has been valuable. I will also send out the link to the webinar recording, as well as to the Campus Kaizen Lean Academy sign-up sheet. If you're interested in exploring that, we hope to see some of you with us for the Lean Academy.